Okay, let's zero in on a single day, January 19th, 2026. If you just glanced at the headlines, you'd see chaos, a bunch of terrible events erupting all over the globe, seemingly at random. But what if they're not random at all? What if these are all connected by one massive shift in how the world actually works?
First up, an absolute tragedy in Adamuz, Spain. A high-speed train derails, slamming head-on into another. The pictures are just horrific. A mangled wreck. At least 39 people are dead. It's one of the worst rail disasters in the country's recent history.
At the very same time, Iran is just on fire. There have been nationwide protests, and the government's response has been brutal. Security forces are using lethal force, and while it's hard to get clear information, some reports are suggesting the death toll could be in the thousands.
And then, down in the southern hemisphere, a full-blown state of catastrophe. A record heat wave is fueling these massive wildfires across south-central Chile. Dozens have been killed, and tens of thousands have had to run for their lives. So you've got three huge, distinct crises, all hitting at once.
So, you have to ask, right? Is this just another messy, chaotic day on planet Earth, or are these events actually symptoms of something much, much deeper? A fundamental change in the rules of the game. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack here.
To really get what's happening, you have to understand that the rules of power have changed. The old playbook for how countries deal with each other, the one that's been in place for decades, is being completely rewritten as we speak.
For the last 70-plus years, the world basically ran on a rules-based order. Institutions like the United Nations, long-term alliances, treaties, that was the idea anyway. But we've moved into something totally different, a transactional order. Now power is all about direct deals, economic muscle, and a straight-up, pay-to-play approach to getting what you want.
And here's a perfect example of this in action. It's called the Board of Peace for Gaza. It started out as a US-led group to manage rebuilding after a ceasefire, but it's quickly turning into something way bigger, a potential rival to the UN, built on a totally different set of principles.
And get this, here's how you get a seat at the table. If your country ponies up $1 billion, you get a permanent membership, forever. Can't swing $1 billion? Well, you might get a temporary, 3-year appointment. Geopolitical influence is now literally for sale. This whole model just sidesteps the UN's diplomatic structures and replaces them with a simple price tag. And here's another example of the new rules. The US wants to buy Greenland. Denmark and its allies said no. So the response wasn't more diplomacy, it was raw economic power. Punishing tariffs are being slapped on 8 key European allies. It's using trade as a weapon to try and force a territorial sale.
And that brings us to our next point. This shift from talking things out to forcing them isn't just happening with money. It's also getting, well, kinetic. We're seeing direct military action replace diplomacy as the tool of choice to get things done.
I mean, just look at Operation Southern Spear. In early January, U.S. forces hit Caracas with a lightning-fast strike and grabbed the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro. And he wasn't treated like a head of state in a conflict. He was flown to New York to face drug trafficking charges. Think about that. It was a regime change, but it was packaged as a law enforcement operation. And of course, this kind of direct action has a very real human cost. The initial strikes killed somewhere between 40 and 100 people. And while the official reason given was about narco-terrorism, the administration was also very clear that it wanted better access to Venezuela's massive oil reserves.
We're seeing a similar dynamic redraw the map over in Syria. The U.S. pulled its forces out, which created a huge power vacuum. And the Kurdish-led SDF, who were a key American ally for years, were basically forced to cut a deal with the Syrian government, an agreement that just completely dissolves the autonomous region they fought for a decade to build.
And the terms of the deal are a total win for Damascus. The Syrian government gets immediate control of its most valuable provinces, all the oil and gas fields included. The SDF as an independent fighting force is just gone. It's a brutal but pragmatic end to a huge chapter of the Civil War, all driven by a sudden power shift, not by years of negotiation.
Now, you might be thinking this is all about foreign policy, stuff that happens over there. But this whole ideology of making unilateral, decisive changes, it's also happening right at home. We're seeing the same transactional thinking reshape domestic policy, and it's changing the relationship between the government and its people.
Take a look at this. It's pretty stark. In a really radical move, the U.S. has slashed its recommended childhood vaccine schedule. They've dropped the number of diseases kids are routinely vaccinated against from 18 all the way down to 11. The new schedule actually looks a lot more like countries such as Denmark, which has one of the leanest schedules out there.
So here's how the new system works. It's broken into 3 tiers.
The first has the core vaccines, like measles and polio, that are still recommended for everyone. But then a whole bunch of others, for things like rotavirus and the flu, have been moved into a shared decision-making category. What that really means is the responsibility is shifting from a blanket public health policy onto individual parents and their doctors.
Which brings us to this incredible paradox. Okay, so the world is being reshaped by force, by transactions, by unilateral moves. So what are all the world leaders talking about when they get together? Well, the theme for the 2026 World Economic Forum in Davos, where, by the way, a record number of world leaders are showing up, the theme is a spirit of dialogue. Yeah, the official goal is all about fostering cooperation and finding common ground. But the reality on the ground couldn't be more different. As one analysis today put it, and I think this is perfect, the world isn't running on a spirit of dialogue, it's running on a logic of coercion. The move away from that old, rules-based system, it feels pretty much complete. And all of this leaves us with one last, really crucial question. From those crash victims in Spain, to the protesters in Iran, to the families fleeing those fires in Chile, in a new world order that runs on transactions and force, who's the one that always ends up paying the price?